making this realization. Making assumptions. Yes, dude, I'm making a very understandable assumption. It doesn't make him less British. Yeah. Like, I don't know if he's Indian or Pakistani or anything like that, but like, it's an understandable assumption to make in this process. It doesn't make him less British at all, not even a little bit. Having said that, we're talking about like British, in the conversation that we're having a conversation about British colonialism and the way that the nefarious ways in which like British colonialism permeates this kind of like dehumanizing propaganda, which at a certain point would have impacted people from people that were maybe even a part of his family, okay, in India, many generations prior.
And so you would put the program back on iPlayer now?
100%. I think you let people make their own minds up. We're adults. We're allowed to see things like that. I mean, it's incredibly moving.
But the argument against it is that if you are addressing an issue like Gaza, doing it through the eyes of a child almost immediately puts you on the side of Palestinians who are suffering.
Well.
Yeah, you got a problem with that? Like, you can just like come out and say that loudly and proudly as a bad thing? People need to check themselves. International peoples that had British culture forced upon them are more British than the Scottish Highland backwoods people or Northern Irish. Just ask them, lol. I don't think people should be riding that proudly about being British or more British than everybody else, okay? Let's have some decency here. It's like someone like myself being like, I'm more American than the fucking Hicks that occupied this land many generations ago. Like, that's not something to be proud of, okay? Let's not forget what we are saying here. I see the point that you are trying to make, against the British racists that claim that if you're brown, you're not a true Brit or whatever, but let's not present being British as a positive here, okay? There should be a sense of shame associated with being a prominent citizen of the imperial core. It's a shame that I definitely carry everywhere. My American identity, okay? It comes with a little bit of shame, and it should. It's healthy. It's healthy to have a little bit of shame for things such as that. Considering that both England and, of course, America has done unimaginably shameful things. Here's Malcolm X. Today is, of course, his birthday. He would have been 100 years old today if he wasn't assassinated by the American government. Did the Zionists have the legal or moral right to invade Arab Palestine, uproot its Arab citizens from their homes, and seize all Arab property for themselves just based on the religious claim that their forefathers lived there thousands of years ago? Only 1,000 years ago, the Moors lived in Spain. Would this give the Moors of today the legal and moral right to invade the Iberian Peninsula, drive out its Spanish citizens, and then set up a new Moroccan nation where Spain used to be, as the European Zionists have done to our Arab brothers? There are these are maps that were designed for this kind of back and forth to take place. So yes, depending on who you ask, Hezbollah is either popular and awesome or very unpopular and not awesome. Having said that, however, obviously Israeli incursions into Lebanon do have a galvanizing factor in this equation. Just like with Ansar Allah, there are people from Yemen who have fled Yemen. And I say fled Yemen as in not just fled the famine in Yemen, but fled the Ansar Allah movement overtaking the government in Yemen, like Sunni Muslims in Yemen that left because they were worried that they might actually be victim to sectarian violence in Yemen, who now ride for the Houthis. And the reason for why they ride for the Houthis, in spite of sometimes directly engaging in battle with the Houthis, is because the Houthis are the only game in town that is actually trying to punish Israel for the crime of genocide. So like I said, Israel is seen by many parties in the region as an extension of American imperialism. At least knowledgeable parties like Hassan Nasrallah, who spoke to the matter in quite an apt fashion, and therefore resisting against the extension of American violence or Israeli violence directly, which will of course which of course over there is seen as Jewish violence. Make no mistake, they don't have the same. They don't have the same careful analysis that we do for obvious reasons, because Israel doesn't fucking say that like we're separate from Judaism. They say they're doing this for Judaism. And so whenever people are resisting against Israel in the region, they get a tremendous amount of support. How exactly were the maps drawn to create sectarian infighting? I mean, people coalesced around certain population centers, but like it was definitely beneficial for countries like Lebanon and Syria to have numerous different ethnic groups or numerous different religious groups inside of one national boundary, so that they were constantly worried, they were constantly destabilized and could not find a unique national identity. One example I will give you is Turkey, right? The Ottoman Empire was destroyed by European colonial forces. They won. Even though the Ottoman Empire technically won its own battle and also did a genocide on the side, even though the Ottoman Empire won its own invasion forces and were able to successfully purge the Anzac forces, for example, from its ranks, at least in the areas that we now know as Turkey, right? Turkey, technically as a nation state, was not actually occupied by any colonial power. There are very few countries on the planet that are not occupied by a colonial power, if you think about it. Like, there's actually a very tiny number. It's pretty crazy. Anyway, and therefore, Turkey has a position where like they were able to develop their own national identity. Iran is another one, yes. Japan is another one, although they got nuked. Thailand is another one. Ethiopia is another one. But the point I was trying to make, no, someone said France. Dog, we're talking about countries that were not occupied by Western colonial powers. What do you mean, France? And yes, that is because the Turks were the colonial power under the Ottoman Empire. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this, is because the reason why I'm mentioning this is because Turkish citizenship does not, with the exception of violence that Alevis are subjected to, which is like a different Muslim sect, and the violence that Kurds are subjected to, Turks broadly do not see themselves as anything but Turks. Even the Alevis also see themselves as Turks ultimately, and even some Kurds will see themselves as both Kurdish and Turkish at the same time. And I think part of that is because that colonial occupation did not actually, that colonial occupation never actually took place inside of the Turkish nation state's boundaries, and therefore there wasn't any room for this kind of like sectarian infighting. Like, there are Jews living in Istanbul. They are Turkish. They're Jewish, but they're also Turkish. Like, they don't see themselves as something separate. Osmanli Empire was not a nation state, nor was it all that Turkish. No, absolutely. You are literally talking to a person whose family fucking comes from, half of my family comes from Greece, and the other half of my family comes from otherwise Arab occupied areas, like Arab populated areas. Half of my family comes from the Greek side, And then the other half of my family comes from the southwestern side or southeastern side of Turkey, like near the border of Syria. So, but I don't say I'm Greek. I don't say I'm like Syrian or Arab. No, Arab occupied is not the right word. Sorry, I meant like comprised of Arabs. I accidentally said that. ESL. So, Kilis, where there were a bunch of Arabs and Kurds, like ethnic Arabs and ethnic Kurds. So, so basically, the point I'm making is that like my national identity is still Turkish, in the same way that like someone might see themselves as someone might come from like a Irish background or English background or Germanic background, but when you are here, when you're living in the United States of America, especially over the course of like multiple generations, you're American. And I think while what do you call it? Like Lebanese people obviously have a national identity, there are still a lot of unresolved ethnic sectarian tensions in the country, and that is by design. I see that as a byproduct of colonial occupation. Yeah. People also don't realize how relatively recent 19th century nationalism is. I know. They also think nationalism just means like Nazi Germany. Nationalism as an emancipatory movement or a like post-colonial movement was the reason why there are nation states. For many countries, it's like a post-World War II phenomena. Like Israel is not the only country that was developed in 1948 or became a country on its own, a nation state on its own in 1948. There are plenty of other countries that developed and became nation states even after Israel. So nationalism projects its ideology back in time, making it seem like it always was. Yeah. So that's what this is. That's that there is this is a bloody endeavor in general. All right, let's see what Gary was saying, by the way.
Which amounts to a serious flaw in the view of the BBC. Would you still sign that letter?
Yes. 13-year-old child narrating. It's not been written by. It's been written by the people who produced the show.
But the BBC failed to do sufficient due diligence.
I don't believe they. I think they just capitulated to lobbying that they get a lot of lobbying.
And audiences didn't know something quite fundamental about the child, which is that he was the son of a Hamas official. Isn't that a problem?
I don't think so, no.
Like you're blowing this dude's mind right now. Like that statement holds a lot of power. It holds a lot of power. That moment of honesty, that moment of bravery, because you do incur penalties. Sometimes you can literally go to fucking prison in places like in places like the UK. But that right there is a moment of brutal honesty that I think is very enlightening for a lot of other people, where they go, wait a minute, why the fuck do I think the Minister of Agriculture, just because like he's a part of the Hamas civil governance division, is like a bad dude, and that his son must be branded as like a Hamas child? Seeing this realization happen in real time by a brown British dude is additionally funny. It goes to show you how powerful social conditioning is, because like, dude, they did I don't know where he's from originally or where his family is from originally, but like the same exact dynamic existed for whatever nationalist emancipatory movement that happened in the former fucking colony that that your family came from. You know what I mean? Or I don't even know if he actually is making